Hey everyone, this is Mike, and as I mentioned in yesterday's video, today we're going to be talking about Samurai. Now in this one it's not going to be about my personal opinion on the job itself when it comes down to its gameplay and that kind of stuff, but it's going to be about the evolution of Samurai, how it came into the game, kind of very underwhelming and not really being played all that much at all by the high-end raiders. Of course it was still a very popular job when it first came out in Stormblood and being played by a lot of people, but it didn't really make its way into the raiding scene all that well, whereas right now Samurai is the most desired melee DPS in the game, which is quite a stark contrast towards when it first came out back in Stormblood. So how come it is very desired right now? What changed when it comes down to systems or team compositions? Why is it so good right now? So first of all, when it came out back in Stormblood, there were already a lot of things against Samurai in the first place. First thing being the fact that Samurai does not have a raid buff, and back then raid buffs were pretty much desired by any team for a couple of different reasons. First of all, back in Heavensward, the meta team was fully raid buff centered, and that kind of team composition trickled down into Stormblood as well, and a lot of people just wanted to have all those raid buffs because it was what everybody was doing, it is what the best players were doing, and of course if the best players are doing it, it must be the best for us as well, even though technically it doesn't really matter all that much, but basically everybody was doing it, so monkey see, monkey do, everybody did that as well. Now because of this, Samurai was already kind of excluded because it didn't have a raid buff in the first place. Second reason is that the general team composition was as follows. We had 2 melees, 1 ranged physical and 1 ranged magical, and the ranged physical DPS was kind of relying on a Dragoon to be in the party to give them the piercing resistance down debuff on the boss, because ranged physical DPS does all piercing damage, and the piercing resistance down would be, I believe, either a 5 or a 10% damage buff for that person in the group, as if you had 1 or sometimes even 2 physical range DPSs, then you really wanted to have that Dragoon in the party. And because of that, you now only had 1 extra slot to be giving to a second melee, and then you'd have a choice in between either a ninja, a monk or a samurai, and because of that, most of the time the samurai was going to be left out, mainly also because of the fact that it didn't have a raid buff. Now why do these raid buffs sound so very enticing to have in your party? Well, very simple fact really, and that is the fact that FFXIV exists. FFXIV is a website that pretty much everybody probably knows that is watching this video, but in case you don't, it's basically a website where people rank themselves or their teams against other teams to see how good they are. And of course, the higher your number is going to be, the better of a player you are going to look like. And to pad those numbers, a lot of people went to very extreme measures sometimes as well. But one of the easiest way to increase your numbers was to have a lot of raid buffs in your party composition, because if you are doing just your normal damage types without having any raid buffs, you would do, let's say, 7,000 DPS. I'm pulling numbers out of my ass here, but we'll just take it as an example. So no raid buffs available in your party, 7,000 DPS. Now if you were to play exactly the same in a different party composition that had all of the raid buffs available to them, and now all of a sudden your 7,000 DPS would shoot up to 8,000 because you are getting extra DPS from all of these different raid buffs. And of course, if people look at your FFXIV's profile page and they see, oh, this guy is doing 7,000 but this other guy is doing 8,000, the person that is doing 8,000 is looking like the better player, even though they might have been doing exactly the same things, just without the raid buffs. So that's where one of the reasons why raid buffs were very desired back then already came in, because it made you look like a better player on FFXIV. Now, going into Shadowbringers, there were a couple of things that changed when it came down to the systems of the game, as well as to the FFXIV website, that made it so that raid buffs weren't all that amazing anymore when it comes down to your own personal DPS output shown on your profile page. And the main reason for that is that personal DPS is not the one thing shown on your profile page anymore, but it is your raid contribution. And because of that, it doesn't matter, let's say if you're playing a samurai and you're doing 12,000 raid DPS contribution, even though through raid DPS buffs you might be doing 13,000, the people are still only going to be seeing that 12,000. Now, because of the way raid DPS contribution works, you also want to have people that can make more use out of your personal raid buffs to also pad your raid contribution again as well. So there's a lot of different reasons as to why something like a samurai was much more desired at that point. Now, going into some other changes that kind of made this possible as well. So first of all, back at the start of Shadowbringers, Samurai's personal DPS was already brought up quite substantially, meaning that it was already a decent pick back then. Now, because of course it was still relatively new, people still didn't really want to play with the idea of having a samurai in their party as much as some of the other jobs, so people still stuck to what they basically were used to. Now, over the course of Shadowbringers, going into patch 5.1 especially, Samurai got a little bit of a rework on their meditate system, and this meant that not only the gameplay of Samurai felt a lot better and more rewarding and more cohesive as well. It wasn't really as RNG dependent as it was before with the meditate stacking, and basically felt a lot better to play, but the change to their meditate system was also a net DPS buff for the Samurai itself as well, meaning that right now it was really solidified as the highest melee DPS job out there. So because of that, a lot of people started to kind of think about playing it a little bit more and see what team composition worked well around it, and that is where Dancer came into the picture as well. At the moment, the ranged physical DPS aren't really in an amazing spot. Bard isn't really played all that much, Machinist is pretty alright, but when it comes down to having that one ranged physical in your party, a lot of people gravitate towards Dancer, and that is also because stuff like Black Mage and Samurai are incredibly powerful at the moment. And a Dancer benefits from having a very high personal selfish DPS person in the party as well, meaning a Samurai or a Black Mage, because the dance partner buff that you are going to be giving is going to be so much more powerful on that one person that is able to make use of it so much more. And because of that, the kind of team compositions that exist right now came into existence, where you have this really strong physical, or well, that really strong personal DPSer in a Samurai or a Black Mage, or sometimes even both, and then you have a Dancer in order to support them to boost their damage as much as possible, because of course giving dance partner to something like a Ninja is not going to be as beneficial as giving dance partner to a Samurai, because Samurai puts out a whole lot more personal DPS. Because of these differences, a Dragoon not being necessary anymore for the piercing debuff, because resistance down debuffs don't exist anymore, so you have more spots in your party to accommodate for these other jobs. Then the fact that Samurai itself has become a much better job over the time as well of this specific expansion, meaning that at the start of Shadowbringers it was alright, but right now it's a really good job. And then also the combination that you can combine it with something like a Dancer that just buffs that one person so hard, meaning that it is the best to give it to a selfish DPS, just makes it so that Samurai has become a really good job to play in the current patch of this expansion as well. And I'm kind of curious to see how it is going to be evolving towards the rest of this expansion and going into the next one as well. Are we going to see some more buffs to other jobs? For example, Monk and Dragoon aren't really being played all that much anymore at the moment, so are those going to be seeing some changes or some buffs? Who knows? Is maybe Samurai and Black Mage a little bit too strong? Who knows? We'll have to wait and see what they're going to be doing in the next patch. But so far, I'm actually pretty happy with the way that it works right now, with the way that most of the jobs are balanced. I might not like the playstyle of everything just yet, but I think that when it comes down to job balance, the game is in a relatively decent spot at the moment. I'd still like to see some changes here or there, but at least most of the jobs have a space in the meta at the moment, which is really good to see. So that's going to be it for this video. I hope you enjoyed it. I want to thank you for watching. I want to thank my Patreons for supporting me, and I'll see you in the next one.